Hello everyone, it's Ren here. Good to see you guys. Welcome to my room. I was going to say, let's jump straight into our topic, but first, I want to remind you that I have written a book on the INFJ personality, the Ecstatic Soul. Are you an Ecstatic Soul? Are you a Jungian existentialist? If you are not, then I recommend that you purchase this. I have a new book coming out soon. I'll probably make a video where I present present the book without obviously spoiling anything. It's a novel, though it's fiction. This is not fiction. This is an exploration of the INFJ consciousness. This is the best way that I could describe it. Most in-depth, available down below at all the links. Amazon, less than 10 quid. You support me, you hopefully get some edification out of it, and a beautiful addition to your shelf. I mean, look at this. I love this. I'm working with the same people for the cover of my new book, so I've been very pleased with this. So this video is going to be a discussion of do we need new terms in our models of type, of personality type, or are we happy to stick to the terms inherited from Jung via MBTI? So you could also call that JCF, Jungian cognitive functions. Is that sufficient? I think that, I wanted to discuss this in relation to some comments that I had on a video called, let me see, the video is called Linguistic Typology, episode 2, S language versus N language. I wanted to reply to some of the comments, and I will reply to some of these comments, but in addition to being an episode where I reply, I also want to maybe offer some new thoughts, right? It's true that lately a lot of my focus has been, on my 9-to-5 job and on my novel. So I have not been able to do as much thinking on typology as I would like to, but in any case, we're gonna do some thinking about it today, okay? So I think this comment from Eric, aka Terra Hammer, really frames what I want to discuss. He says, okay, I'm going to read what he says. Thank you for explaining your thoughts more, blah, blah, blah. I now better understand where you're getting at, but I'm very curious about actual concrete applied analysis. I'm not sure what the need is to introduce new definitions with describing it, such as symmetry and isomorphism. I don't know if you remember, but I used the term symmetry to describe the form of the direction of fit for S users and isomorphism for N users. Why doesn't it suffice to keep using more accepted commonplace personality type definitions, such as quote S describing the measurable world and describing abstract concepts, and a quote. The more accessible the language of a system, the easier people will be open to using said system. By the way, I don't mean for these comments to be objections, but rather some feedback with tips on how I see you may get going with a good practical system. And Radish Raven says he agrees. And I think there is this general sense that we're not even at a stage where really where we're discussing the relative merits and demerits of these terms. I mean, of course, like that's something that is discussed as well, but the main thing that is discussed is whether we actually need those terms at all, and so what's implied in this case is that perhaps coming up with new words complicates things for no clear benefit. The trade-off's not in favor of this approach, that you complicate things but the return you get is unclear. So I can see some merit in this view, questioning whether we actually do need those new terms. So I think that in the first place, I'll answer why I think that coming up with new terms can be important, okay? But also why I would agree with a lot of the sentiment of the readers that it's something that has to be carefully considered, and there needs to be a lot of very strong reasons for coming up with new terms. So the way that I would answer this is, and I think that Auburn from Cognitive Typology, who also commented something very useful on this video, the video that I'm looking at the comments there, where he said essentially isomorphism is actually maybe not even that useful, even if we take it as something that is justified in terms of coming up with these new terms. He suspects that what we'll find is that we'll find isomorphism in a lot of people who are actually S users. So that it's not clear that actual distinction is the best one to capture the difference, But what I think he'll be interested in what I discuss here. Why is coming up with new terms important, but why is it also something that has to be considered very carefully? Okay. So, in the broadest general sense, you don't come up with new terms if you are happy with the current dominant model. Okay? So, Jungian cognitive functions, dominant model. So dominant that it actually isn't associated with any particular person, right? Whereas the other models, and I always name them, C.S. Joseph, even just saying the word is like, it's giving me mouth ulcers. Objective personality, better, but still a bit of a far cry from some of its original objectives. And then, obviously, all the other alternatives. That includes cognitive type as well. Now, some of them, they come up with new terms. Some of them, I think all of them come up with new terms and new concepts. Cognitive type is lots of them, but with Harry CPT, you get the concept of dipping. With the OPS, you get blast and sleep and jumper, and so like you'll notice if you actually look at it carefully that sometimes these concepts kind of are very similar across models, but I think the reason why these models are coming up with new terms is because, well, there's two possible reasons. One reason is that is the more superficial reason, and the more superficial reason would be that they are trying to stand out and look really new, and so coming up with new terms is this kind of slightly cynical strategy that you could use. Now, the other reason, which would be the less superficial reason, is that coming up with new terms is a way of thinking outside the box. And that's something that you should really not underestimate, okay? I'm not really speaking here in terms of like the, linguistic typology, which I am intending to continue exploring, don't worry, but yeah, the main justification, I think, for coming up with new terms is that if you try to think in a new way, if you try to think fresh thoughts about a system, about a framework, using the original arsenal of words, of terms, conceptual terms, like archetypes, cognitive functions, TIFI, and like sensation, intuition, and all these terms. These terms are not semantically innocent, and what I mean by that is that you may not realize this, but when you employ these terms that you have inherited from Jung and so on and so forth, they come with like this semantic extension. And semantic extension means the realm of possible uses. You could see it as the realm of possible uses to which these terms can be applied, which is by itself defined to a great extent by the way it's been used before in Jung. And so you might not even realize, and someone who inherits these terms and tries to explain new things with these terms may not realize is that actually the term themselves, because they're semantically not innocent, limits the possible novelty of their thinking outside the box. And if that's the main reason for wanting to come up with new terms, because new terms for new concepts, they allow you to think more outside the box, and they allow you not only to solve new problems that might not have been formulated or formulatable with the terms of the old system. So that's one aspect. But in fact, sometimes, some problems cannot be solved at all. So like there's the question of being able to solve a problem or to even see a problem. Sometimes you just need new words to capture new things, because otherwise you might not be able to see the problem. And so I think that, in some sense, as long as we continue using all the words and all the conceptual baggage of the Jungian cognitive functions of MBTI, we're just essentially saying we're sticking to MBTI. That shall remain our paradigm. And if you're happy with it, that's fine. But if you want to move beyond it, you've got to be at least open in principle to the idea of using new words, new terms. Now, in terms of why it's a trade-off and you have to think about it carefully, is that there's a reason why the terms exist, why they have become solidified into this tradition, why a lot of people use them and still prefer them. People don't just prefer them because people are inherently conservative. They also prefer them probably because they intuitively sense that these terms can do a lot for explaining personality and behavior. And that if you're going to come up with new terms, there's always going to be this implicit demand that it be shown that the new terms and the new framework be able to explain more than the old one. Because if it doesn't explain more, then why change, And that's a valid question. Now, that's a question that I think is sometimes passed over a little bit by models that aim to have a scientific approach. Because you have this trend, right? At least you have it with things like OPS, cognitive type, maybe rational typology as well. So this idea of going in a scientific direction, in a direction that you can actually trust, that gives you the true type. I think what these models sometimes, by being really, really focused on this idea of finding out the true type through, verifiable empirical experiments, is that it's not just that people are looking for more. They want to have this storytelling around their type and everything. Even on a scientific basis, being empirical is not sufficient. Like, you could have an empirical theory, perfectly scientific, that is less interesting than a non-empirical, unscientific theory. Less interesting because it allows people to explain less. And people might say, okay, maybe the other theory, like, we can't say it's scientific, but for my purposes, I can explain so much and it seems to make sense, that's enough for me. If you have a scientific theory that's empirically based and it seems to be sound and it has a lot of interesting aspects to it, but it doesn't really allow you to explain anything else or anything more, maybe explain less than the other theory that is not scientific. Not only are people going to continue preferring the non-scientific one, but I would actually argue that objectively the non-scientific one could be better. You know, just because something is scientific in the sense that you can falsify it, it doesn't mean that it's intrinsically better. It can be uninteresting. You always have to think about those two axes: scientific theories, non-scientific theories, interesting theories, fruitful theories, uninteresting theories, fruitless theories. And there's 4 different types, right? There's like scientific and fruitful, scientific and uninteresting, non-scientific and fruitful, and then non-scientific and uninteresting. Obviously, the one they want to avoid the most is the last one. But between an interesting and fruitful unscientific theory and a fruitless and barren scientific theory, of course, we're always going to prefer the unscientific fruitful one, And I think that's perhaps this is kind of partly what we have at the moment, is MBTI is seen as unscientific but fruitful, and the competitors have to come forward and say, okay, we aim to be scientific, but we also aim to be fruitful. To be fruitful is, again, be able to formulate problems, identify problems, solve problems, but also be able to give explanation for behavior, for differences between people of the same type or of different types. That other models they're able to provide an explanation, quite a convincing explanation, makes sense to people. They can work with that. If people they have a look at the new theories, and those theories are empirically sound, but they're very vague, or they can't really explain, provide the same kinds of explanations. Yeah, people are going to prefer the older theories, again, not because they're conservative, but because they're rational, they're pragmatic, So I think my video has been a bit all over the place. These were just some thoughts, but at the moment, as you might have noticed, I'm more in this exploratory mode. So those who have been sticking with me, well, I'm grateful. And don't forget, I'm also on Patreon. I wish you a beautiful end of the weekend, guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.